Hi, David Moore, Equity Advantage with Robert Smith of Peregrine Private Capital. And we want to talk a little bit about what we just discussed with the office. And I think it's that proverbial, drop in the water that just increases and starts picking up everything else. So it's like the office is sort of symbolic, but it's going to impact banks, lending, everything else. So Bob, you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's that's a great way to start in terms of, because retail investors who may not be predisposed to office to begin with from a property type, because the majority of people in 1031 exchange are selling some type of habitational real estate. So that's usually what they 1031 exchange into. And it's like, okay, well, how's this going to affect me? Well, it will affect you because, as David just said, it's like throwing a pebble into a pool and you get this ripple out effect. So even though office as a property type may be removed from most retail investors from an ownership standpoint, it still represents or has represented a substantive part of the CRE, the commercial real estate environment. And so for that to be as negatively impacted from a valuation standpoint as is being projected now, up to 50%, that will have a ripple out effect on every other real estate type. And so when doing a 1031 exchange or reinvesting, you need to be aware of that this is what's going on, and ultimately that will have some kind of effect on whatever asset type you decide to reinvest in. And so you better think long and hard about that and perhaps try to identify a more defensive property type that would perform or hold up well in an environment where valuations may continue to be depressed for a while and credit may continue to get tighter. So perhaps we're at a point in time where it's best to go on the defensive from a property investment standpoint in terms of how can I hold on to the money I've made, as opposed to the offensive as how much more money can I make?
Maximum yield. Right. So yeah, like my buddy Jim, when we worked with him, what was that, about 6 months ago, he wasn't really concerned. He started talking about ROI. He wasn't really concerned about that. He just wanted preservation of capital, right? He just wanted to make sure he was going to be okay. Now I got a couple comments actually on this. So one, office buildings, I would venture to guess most office buildings are going to be utilizing cost seg, number one. So you're really just sort of, it doesn't increase your overall depreciation on assets, it just accelerates it. But what that ultimately means is that you can have tremendous erosion of value and still trigger tax on disposition, as I said, even in short sale or foreclosure. On the acquisition side, I think, ultimately, at the end of the day, Peregrine Private Capital and you have been dealing with the DST space for a long time. And one of the big benefits of that space is people going forward. One, is that debt non-recourse?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. So they don't have to go out there and fill out a bunch of old paperwork to go get this thing taken care of, get that loan. It's going to be there. Mm-hmm. The other comment I've got, so one, you're not having to apply for the loan. You can get your money working if you need it to, but you're going to get into this stuff. The other thing I guess I would say is a big fallacy of 1031 is that you have to replace debt in that transaction. We've talked about it before, but I just want to hit it again because I think it's very timely for people to understand debt can go away two ways in an exchange, one by going down value, the other by adding cash. So when we start looking at these buildings that are going away and the debt and the need for debt on a replacement property, you're going to meet with Bob, let's say, and he's going to look at his portfolio of DST offerings and get you sort of that, throw the different loan to value LTVs into a blender and mix it all up to get somebody where they need to go with the debt. So I think really people need to understand that your ability to get lending going forward may get tougher, but
that I think that's an excellent point, and it's a point that can't be made too strongly at this time, because if the lending environment becomes even tougher, tighter, colder, if you will, then obviously one of the advantages of DST for replacement property purposes is most DSTs come prepackaged with bank loan, a non-recourse loan that the property sponsor as an institutional entity has gone out and encumbered the property with. So that may help you eliminate one more variable in the 1031 exchange process, whereby, now I've got to go out and qualify for my own loan in an even tougher lending environment. Well, if you don't want to have to deal with that, then the prepackaged nature of debt with DSTs allows you to forego that. And it might be you could consider it an escape hatch. So I don't think that's an excellent point, and I don't think it can be too strongly made given what's may happen to the credit markets given the meltdown in the office sector.
Really, if we're looking, the cost of money is obviously, increased a fair amount in the last year. But I really don't think, you and I are old enough to remember when rates were probably 3 times as high as they currently are, almost. Not 3 times, but close to it.
Close to it.
Yeah, so you look at what the cost of capital is and what the cost, money isn't really that far out of hand. It is for somebody that's never had to pay for it, right? But it's it's really not that bad.
We don't want to go down that dark road.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying. So it's like, okay, so this is sort of the way we are, the world we're in. But the reality is it does dramatically impact the return on investment, which ultimately is going to impact people's ability to refi assets they already have. So I always sort of look at the market, and as long as we've got market liquidity, then we're all okay. My concern is I don't want to see it stop like it did last time, right? So, cost of money going up, as long as the loans are available, that's what I'm concerned about. I think more so than ever today, we're in a world where you better be looking at what you've got and where you want to go with it. And do not start looking for replacement property after you've sold something. And people ask all the time when I want them to think about an exchange, and I'm going to tell them when they buy the property, that's typically I get involved after the fact, right? They already own those things, but at least when you contemplate a sale, understand what your tax liability is so you can therefore rationally decide whether an exchange is even the right thing to do, because it's not always right. There's an opportunity cost of doing that transaction, doing the exchange. And the deal is, even though 1031 is over 100 years old at this point, the number of calls we get the day of a closing, or unfortunately the day or two after a closing. And the other thing I just want to point out too is with reverse exchanges, somebody said, well, gee, you haven't sold yet, so and you've got this purchase pending, well, just go buy it and then do a reverse when you sell in the future. If you close on this thing before we're involved, it's too late. You can't legally own the new and old property simultaneously. So in a 1031 context, and that's what usually Bob and I are talking about with respect to this. You don't have to be in an exchange to go buy a DST property from Bob. I want to stress that. You can, if you want to go out and just buy something that's a passive investment, a lot of times your financial advisor will say a REIT, but that's not real. That's an entity that owns real estate. You don't get the benefits and burdens of where you do with a DST. But you just got to look at this stuff and understand what your options are earlier rather than later. Don't wait until something closes to start looking for stuff. Certainly don't wait till you've got a sale pending to understand what your tax liability is going to be on something. Understand what it is, plan ahead, and look at what options you have out there. And anything, as long as we've got the ability to transact, that's what we want to see. So Cost of capital is another consideration. I always talk about, even with the IRA, in our IRA 401k world, with a leveraged investment with an IRA, you've got tax exposure on income or gain attributable to other people's money. And people say, well, gee, I can't do it then. No, that's just another thing to consider when you're looking at transactions, another fact to put into your ultimate ROI. So I think you've got to look at this stuff, understand where you are today and where you want to be in 2, 5, or 10, understand what the world's telling you, but plan ahead. And before we have a problem with financing, try to get the deals done, right?
Correct.
So take that. We're going to sign off, and we'll be right back with you. David Moore, Equity Advantage. Robert Smith, Peregrine Private Capital.